Live. I'm Haley Nelson, and we are back with our STEM career series where we learn about careers in science, technology, engineering, and math from role models in those fields. And today's role model is Shauhin Alavi. Shaheen is a field biologist currently researching the cognition and ecology of orangutans. We actually met while studying baboons in Kenya, and his future work is going to take him to Indonesia to study forest fires, all of that, and right now he is in his last year of getting his PhD. So we're going to learn all about our STEM role model and more when we connect with Shaheen in just a moment. But first, I want to remind you that today's event is live and interactive. So below this video window, you'll see a box where you can ask questions and participate in our polls. We're going to try and include as many of you as possible as we go, so listen for your name and your question. So right now, it's time to say hello to Shaheen. Shaheen, hello, how are you?
Good, thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us today. Let's just jump right in and get to some questions. Let's start with the basics. So what is a biologist?
So biology is a pretty broad umbrella that encompasses a lot of different types of scientists, but pretty much it's anybody who studies any aspect of life, really. So you have biologists who study things on really microscopic levels, like cellular levels, microbial levels, things like that. You got people like me who study sort of ecology in the natural world, and then you have, biology that branches into medicine and into even broader sort of large-scale questions. So it's a pretty broad, the study of living things in general.
The study of living things, yes, that does sound broad. We have a comment. This is from New Richmond Elementary. These are sixth graders. They have kind of a lot to say. They say, what kinds of data do you collect, and specifically, what methods do you use to make sure your findings can be understood months or years later by other scientists? It says, my students often want to take shortcuts on recording data and observations needed later for making important calculations or drawing conclusions. He would love to hear what you have to say about the importance of that skill.
That is a great question. Well, so depending on the type of project that I'm doing, like specifically the projects I'm doing now, any data we try to take, whether it's observational or whether it's experimental or something that we measure, to keep it usable and just generally useful and understandable into the future, you try to convert that into numbers of some sort. And so some way that is sort of transcends languages, and some way that's sort of just reusable, and you can be able to analyze it in many different ways. And so, and in standardized ways as well, so ways that are repeatable, so that if other people want to go and be able to repeat your study, they can, read the methods that you outlined in whatever you published, and then they can go and try to understand that and repeat that themselves if they wish. So for me in particular, when I'm observing animals, I'm very much interested in their diets and into sort of their travel routes and things like this. And so, I'll take rates of things that they're eating. I'll take the actual items that they're eating, get weights, get the chemical compositions, and get values for all of those things. Or if they're taking routes, I'll track those routes and come up with metrics that are useful for me.
So when you talk about your methods in a paper or something like that, so someone can repeat it, you say very specifically how you did the observation, how you collected the data, so that others could do it exactly like that and compare their data?
Yeah, that's one of the most important things about science, really, is just things have to be as clear and as repeatable as possible. So that if somebody wanted to go repeat your study, what part of what makes your study valid is if someone else does the same thing and they get a similar result, then hopefully all the work that you did as a scientist, holds up and it's pretty valid. So when we publish things, we go into an intense amount of detail about the way we collected everything, how we defined everything, now there's a big culture within science of data sharing and making everything really transparent and available. So outside of just the publications, if you're another scientist, you can go and download the supplemental materials from whatever publication, whatever company published it, and they can download the data themselves and actually see for themselves what you did, even if they want more detail than what you published.
That's so great. Scientists have to share what they're doing so that everybody can have that knowledge together. We have another question here from New Richmond Elementary, some more sixth graders. So you're working in the field a lot. This says, what tools do you use in the field? Maybe you can describe your field.
So I'm a sort of field ecologist type of scientist. So for me to collect the data that I need for my research interests, I have to actually go out into where my study subjects live, which most of the time is some sort of jungle or savanna or some sort of outdoor sort of wild landscape. And there's two parts to that question. There's the type of equipment that you need just to be able to sort of traverse those environments, right? So you need your the appropriate types of clothing and your sort of backpack with any types of equipment that you would need just to be able to walk clearly in a very thick jungle. All of the health types of things you need in case you get hurt, and your water supplies, things to sterilize water, those types of equipment. And then there's your research equipment, which is going to be sort of special and different from your everyday needs, right? So for me personally, I'll do a lot of things with soil samples or collecting animal urine or feces or stuff like that. And so I have my whole range of equipment that I take with me every day. But then I also have my machete. I also have, I work in a swamp now, so we can't really sit on the ground. So if we want to rest, we have special hammocks that we hang up to be able to rest. All your waterproof gear, your compasses to navigate, things like that are pretty important.
Wow. So I have to ask it because I know it's on everybody. You collect feces. So what do you put that in, and how do you collect that? Just clear that up real fast, and then we'll move on.
So depending on what you're going to do with that feces, if you're going to do anything genetic, you need to be much more sterile in how you do it. If you need anything to do hormonal types of things, anything that requires the chemistry of that sample, you have to get it and preserve it and get it frozen quickly. But for me, the last projects I were interested in is mostly just on nutritionally what's in that feces. So I don't have to be quite as careful with long-term storage. So really, it's opportunistic. If you see a sample, if an animal gives you a sample, you have to figure out how to get it quickly. And what I generally do is I have all my tubes and things like that in my pack and my whole set of gloves that I take with me every day. And I just do the inverted glove method. I put the glove on, grab it, pull it over, tie it off, and put it in my little cooler until I can get to the lab and put it in the appropriate tubes.
All right. I will not be eating anything out of your cooler. Okay, so here we go. We have a question, or this is from Winnie and Ethan. They're in 4th grade. They want to know what animals you study.
Yeah, so I specialize in primates, really. So right now I work with wild orangutans. Before that, I've studied baboons. Before that, it's been spider monkeys and rhesus macaques, and sort of anything related to us in that greater primate order is really what I study now.
What's your favorite? What do you like to study the most?
Among the primates?
Yeah.
My personal favorite are the baboons. They're just super fun to study and to be out there with, and there's so much to see. And they're very intelligent animals. They're very social animals. They're very active. They're always doing something. There's always something to observe, something to see. For me personally, following something like an orangutan that's more solitary, there's not as much interacting going on. It's mostly them kind of moving around in the forest and eating, and that's pretty much the extent of it. But the baboons are, I don't know, there's more dynamic things going on there to watch, so they're more fun to work with for me.
And you spend a lot of time, I just know because I was there and I saw you really living with the baboons. You were with them during their daily lives, and they're on the ground, so you're getting to see them up close all the time. So you think that might be part of it too, being able to be close.
Yeah, well, I mean, you remember you were there with us, and so you saw just how close we can get. Sometimes you'll be sitting right next to them in certain situations for the animals that really are comfortable with you. And so normally there's a habituation period that you have to do before you start any study because they are wild, right? So they are going to be very nervous and mistrusting for good reason. And so you spend a lot of time in the beginning developing that trust with them for them to be able to tolerate you, let alone let you sit amongst them like that. So for the baboons, it was a little trickier than for other animals that I worked with. And so that also made it a little more rewarding for me. And once I finally was able to sort of sit amongst them and do the things we needed to do, that was pretty satisfying too. With the orangutans, they're a lot easier to habituate than the baboons. So it wasn't as challenging, and it wasn't as, and even though you can sit right next to them and stuff, they're kind of just tolerating you. They're pretty much ignoring you. The baboons, for science, it's not great if they're interested in you, but for your personal entertainment, it is kind of fun because they are curious and they are kind of always always ready to mess with you.
What a cool job. What a cool job. Okay, so let's jump right back in for another sixth grader at New Richmond says, what are some of the physical challenges of working in a field setting, and how do you prepare for that?
A lot of answers to that question too. It is actually quite physically challenging, especially depending on where you're working. But like if you're in a jungle setting, for example, there's the type of research I do. We have to be with the animals throughout their entire day, otherwise you don't really have a good chance of finding them. So unless you're going to have transmitters on them, right, which sometimes you're not allowed to do depending on the animal, you have to get there before they wake up, and you have to stay with them until they fall asleep so you can find them again. So that part of it is physically challenging because it becomes 12, 14, 15-hour days of you hiking around with them. Most of the time, it is really wild. So there's no like hiking trails or anything like that. That part of things is absent. So you're really exposed to the elements, and you're exposed to things like plants that have toxins or that are sharp and that are painful, or insects and things that are willing to bite you, and all the sort of itchy madness that happens. Most people are not used to the heat and those types of things, so you're dealing with the heat, the humidity, and all those types of exhausting aspects of it. For me, where I work now, the challenge is really that it's a swamp. So it's a different physical experience trying to be able to walk through all of that kind of slushy, sludgy stuff. You get tired. So you actually, to be a field scientist, at least one that observes animals the way I do, maybe if you're studying something stationary, it's not as intense, but if you're actually having to travel where the animal leads you, because you don't have much say in where they go, you do have to have some sort of level of fitness just to be able to keep up, really.
Well, how would you suggest people, keep up their fitness? Because you're in the field for a long period of time. You'll be out in a place for almost a year in the swamps, and you're already tired going through your day. Do you have time to work out, even?
Yeah, I make time. So for me, that's actually one of my personal hobbies, and it's a way to, keep myself a little bit more mentally happy while I'm out there, because you are there for a long time, like you said, like a year or more sometimes. It is the same routine every day, and there's not much social interaction. There's no internet. There's no cell phone. There's none of that. You're just there. In most sites. Some sites you have internet. Where I work, there's no internet. And so that was kind of one of my own personal things that I could do at the end of each day, is just do some exercise out there in the forest and separate myself a little bit from the routine. And it definitely helps you in the forest too, if you're able to get that, if you can fit the time in to do it at the end of each day. And as your body gets stronger too, it becomes less difficult to chase the animals around in the forest, really.
You gotta keep yourself fit to work in the jungle. Wow.
Yeah, a friend of mine and I started a little blog about how we do that out there. So if anyone's curious, you can get that information.
Well, I have another comment from Annie. She asks, what's the difficulty factor in trying to gather data in the field versus in the lab? Because you have to do both of those things.
Yeah. Well, they're very different. So in the lab, there's a higher level of control, and you're also a lot more specific in the types of data that you're trying to get. So at least in my lab experience, like I generally do a lot of things for hormone types of things, and where we're processing your samples and looking for specific metabolites in their urine and things like that. So it's just, you have to be very careful, and there's a lot of steps involved, and at the end of all this long process you go through, the computer will spit out a set of numbers for you. So it's not necessarily difficult, it's just, you need the skills and the time and the equipment. In the field, it's trickier because you have to, think about what you're going to record the data on and how you're going to store it. Mm-hmm. So if you're working somewhere dry, you can get away with like a notebook, pen and paper. If you're working somewhere really wet and rainy and humid, you might want to invest in some sort of waterproof digital thing that won't rip every time you write on it because it's wet or something like that. And then also, depending on what you're studying, if you're someone who studies plants or something like that, it's not as challenging to go find your plants and collect what you're collecting and record that data. If you're studying animals, you can't really predict what they're going to do or where they're going to go, and so whatever it is you're trying to measure, you have to pay a lot of real close attention so they don't miss it when it happens, or if it's something you have to collect with you. So they're just different, but I guess you have to plan more if you're doing it in the field.
It sounds like you have a lot of planning to do. You can't even write on your paper. Well, we have a comment or a question from Tatum, Paul, Raya, and Ariana. They all want to know, do you work with a team or a partner?
Great question. Almost always with a team now, especially because of, well, one, for safety. Like, obviously, it's not a smart idea to go out there in a jungle by yourself in case something does happen. But really, you can't really do it without a group of people to support you, especially with the types of data we work with. Normally, we're following several animals at one time. We're collecting many different types of data, and also you're trying to run the little camp that you set up. So it helps you a lot to have a group of people to be able to divvy up the responsibilities for, and makes everything much more efficient. And it's just a lot more easier to have people to be able to interact with when you're out there.
For long periods of time. Well, we have another, this is a fun one. Keller Hernandez asks, how do animals act around you?
It depends. So for the ones I work with, we spend a long time establishing that level of trust and tolerance there. So if we did our jobs right, they ignore us completely, and then we can actually study them. When you first meet them, they're pissed. They do not want you to be there. They do not like you. They're either ready to run or they're ready to threaten you, and anything they can to make you not, to stop you from bothering them. When it's animals I don't study, so like something that's not a primate, if I run into a bear or a pig or something of that nature, a big bird, they're usually pretty scared because either of a history that they've had with people, local people there, or you just startle them because they don't expect to see a strange bipedal creature, two-legged upright creature in their environment right there. They generally react unfavorably. So I've been chased by things, I've startled things and had them run away. I've had the whole gambit of interaction you can have with animals.
Well, just piggybacking on that, we have a question from Queens Creek Elementary, 5th grade science. They've asked, have you ever been scared or attacked by an animal?
I have been scared.
Do you ever get hurt doing your job? And that's from Allison, Zainab, and they're in 4th grade.
I don't want to make the job sound like life-threatening or anything, but there's definitely some risk involved. I have been injured, not because of animals, but just from the type of environment it is. So between dangerous plants or just the difficult terrain, I've had times where I've fallen off the sides of ridges and stuff like that, or have had trees fall and hit me.
Shaheen, don't fall off a ridge.
It gets your heart pumping, that's for sure. It's not boring. But yeah, I've definitely been scared. In Kenya was probably the scariest set of experiences I had with the animals, just because the elephants there are real nervous around people. There's a long history of poaching and things like that. So when they see a person, they're really fast to want to charge you and get you out of there because they're going to assume you're a poacher. And so most of my time there actually was involved an angry group of elephants trying to chase me out of the area when I was trying to follow the baboons. So it's pretty scary.
And a poacher is a person who's trying to kill the elephants, right?
Right. A poacher, is a person who's illegally hunting the animals, usually to sell some aspect of them. So in the case of elephants, they're trying to sell their tusks.
Ugh, yikes. Yeah, well, that's probably why they're scared. I can see that. We've got another question. Ooh, this is a double question because we've got Miss Boland's combination class asks, what do baboons eat? How hard was it to observe the baboons? And from Matthew and Nico at Fairhill, they want to know what apes eat. There you go. What do baboons eat? What do apes eat? And how hard was it to observe baboons?
Great question. Baboons tend to eat a lot of grassy types of things, and so you'll see them grazing a lot, feeding on sort of the grasses and the corms and little root-like things. It looks like they're kind of like digging into the ground every now and then. They put something in their mouth. So that's a big bulk of their diet, but they also eat fruit and anything that they can grab off a tree. They're pretty opportunistic, so I've even seen baboons, occasionally eat meat once in a while. You'll see a little rabbit make the bad decision to run through the baboon group or something, and the baboon will sort of just sit there and reach out and grab it and have a little rabbit snack kind of thing. So they eat a lot of types of things, but the majority of their diet will be eating grasses and stuff like that. For the apes, again, they prefer fruit, so the big bulk of their diet is going to be various types of fruit that are available to them. But they're really generalists, so they'll eat whatever is available at that time. If fruit is available, that's what they'll eat. If fruit's not available, they'll eat bark, they'll eat leaves, they'll eat flowers, they'll eat bugs. So yeah, they'll make do one way or the other.
We have another question from some fourth graders, and they say, do you only research these animals in the wild, or are you also trying to save them? I guess, yeah, do you only research them in the wild, or are you trying to save them?
Excellent question. Definitely, I am also involved in conservation and trying to save these animals. You can't. It's a sort of difficult to be doing one and not do the other. Not because you have to do them both together, but because you eventually. It's hard not to care about them once you're out there with them. You get to know them and you get to see what the environment's like. You get to see the actual damage being done by things like climate change and deforestation, and you get to meet the local people there and everything. It becomes part of your life, so you really do start to care, and so you really do get involved in trying to help the animals in any way that you can.
More animal questions here. We have Tatum, Paul, Raya, and Ariana. They ask, how many animals have you worked with? And here's a sort of slashy question from Gladys, Lisa, Javier, and they're in fourth grade. They wonder if all animals you study, are they interesting? So how many do you work with, and are they interesting?
Interesting question. I've worked with like types. I assume you mean types of animals.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So. I
would assume.
Yeah.
You don't have an exact number. 4,173.
No. Mostly different types of primates at this point, but I have also helped do some work on birds. I've also helped do help people I know do data on other types of animals. So I've collected data on bats before. I've collected data on various things, but my personal research has mostly been primates. So I've worked with macaques, spider monkeys, baboons, and orangutans at this point. And so in the future, we'll see. There's potential to do some stuff with chimpanzees or stuff like that, but I'm not sure yet. What was the other part of that question? Are they interesting?
Yeah. Are all animals you study interesting?
So as far as this is a two-part question for me. So the actual data I get in and the research questions that I'm asking, once you have all that data, it is always interesting as a scientist because you're learning things and discovering things, and that part of things is always interesting. And once you start looking at the results you're getting, you're realizing you're always surprised about some aspect of these animals. Actually collecting that data is a different story. Certain animals, like I said, for me, the baboons, they're very fun and interesting. Other animals, while on paper are very interesting, following them can be really, really boring. So yeah, they're definitely not all interesting to follow.
Okay, that's a good perspective that I don't know that many people would know about. So that's awesome. We have Sanjay, Mohammed, Zayad. They're fourth graders. They want to know what habitat you work with, and Tatum, Paul, Ryle, and Ariana. They're on a roll. They want to know what jungle do you go to most. So what habitat and what jungle?
Yeah. So the habitat I'm working in now is a peat swamp forest. So what that means is peat is a special type of soil that is over time as things decompose and they create this kind of spongy, mossy kind of material. You can buy, they sell peat at Home Depot as fertilizers if you want to kind of feel what that feels like. But and it's a swamp forest, so it's majority of the year there's water, up to your knees or higher sometimes, depending on what type of swamp you're in. And the trees, there's a lot of vines and sort of where I work personally, it's a recovering forest, so there's a lot of kind of. If you have a forest that's never been damaged, the trees are always really big and healthy. One that's recovering, you got a lot of young, sort of skinny trees and vines and thorny things like that. So that's sort of the habitat that I work in. And the jungle that I go to the most, right now, my research site is in Borneo, which is an island in Indonesia. Indonesia is in Southeast Asia. It's a large collection of islands that makes up that country. And I work on the one called Borneo. And the name of the jungle is called Huanan. And so I've been going there regularly, since 2013.
It's called what?
The forest is called Tuana.
Tuana. Okay, all right. Sorry,
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure I had the name right. Cool, Tuana. We have more questions from Sanjay, Mohammed, Zayad, and Allison Zainab, and they are asking, is your job surprising? And also, as a biologist, what is your favorite thing about your job?
I feel like I'm constantly surprised in my job, either by things I'm learning, like by doing the job, or just by unexpected things that happen in that job, or unexpected things I didn't know I would need to be good at in that job. So like I feel like I'm constantly surprised when I'm working in this job. Like for example, I never thought that I'd have to be really good at building and repairing generators, or like I never thought that I'd have to be, or that I'd have to like become a really good accountant, or all these kinds of things, or learn how to computer program and stuff like that. Like for those parts are surprising, and then yeah, when you're studying the animals surprise you regularly. There's the things that they do that you would have never guessed you would see. What was the other part of the question?
Allison and Zainab want to know your favorite thing about the job.
Favorite thing about the job. Besides the animals, because obviously that part is really fun and I enjoy that, is getting to go to some of the cool places I've been and meet the people there and learn about their cultures is probably one of my favorite things about the job.
Cool. Well, we've talked a lot about what you're doing now, so let's shift and talk about how you got to be where you are today. We've got questions already coming in about your past from Gladys, Lisa, and Javier, and they want to know what inspired you, and they also want to know, were you inspired by Jane Goodall to become a primatologist? So what inspired you, and did Jane Goodall inspire you?
To be honest, I had no plans to be doing what I do now. I was all set. When I got to college, I was going to be an engineer, and I was double majoring in music and engineering. I had no intention of doing science at all, really. And then, as a kid, I was always interested. Always glued to the Discovery Channel, Animal Planet, stuff like that. The interest was there, but that was not my path. Because my dad was an engineer, and I wanted to be like my dad, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't until I took a class by chance. Like, a buddy of mine came into my room and like, we both need one more credit to stay full time as college students, and what class should we take? And I took a class on primate ecology just by chance because it sounded like, oh, that'll be fun. Like, what's that about? And then from there, I was hooked. I was just, it made me realize, oh, this is a real thing. The professor eventually became an advisor to me and told me how, no, this is actually something he does every year, all year, and that, he sort of allowed me to break into it mentally and introduce me to people to start. So
you were like, this is a job?
Yeah, really, it's really how it was to me. I was sort of surprised by it, and then I was hooked. I never looked back. And then as far as Jane Goodall, she is an incredibly inspirational person, but I can't say she inspired me to become a primatologist. Like, I became a primatologist. I was always aware of Jane Goodall. She's a very famous person. But it wasn't really until I was already involved that I really, really got to learn about everything she's contributed and everything she's still doing.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I wonder, I have, Sarah and Anna have another question. They wonder how long you've been doing this, and is it scary?
I don't know if scary is the right word. It's definitely an adventure every time. It's very exciting. There are scary moments, but I wouldn't say it as a whole is scary, the job. But I started doing research generally in, I want to say, 2008 or 9. So there was like when I was first getting into science and as a career, I was on the fence. Like 50% of me wanted to go into like paleoarchaeology and study Neanderthals and things in the past. The other half of me wanted to do what I do now. And so I tried them both to really get a sense of like which one am I good at, which one do I really like. And that's when I started really actually getting physically involved in science. I went to 2 different research sites as a volunteer just to do it physically, learn what it is, and then I eventually decided, I prefer studying things in the forest and stuff like that.
Well, when you were starting out, I have a question from Dayanara and Marjona, and they're in 4th grade at Fair Hill Elementary, and they wanted to know if it was hard at first.
Hard starting out. I feel like because I started already towards the end of being in college, not necessarily hard, but I had to catch up a lot, like on stuff. If I had started my first year, it probably would have been a smoother transition. But I had to just try to take everything in and hit the ground running, sort of. I think the hardest part is really just networking, because to really get into it and to get physical experience, you have to meet people and you have to know what's available and who's studying where and where to apply. And so I feel like that's probably the biggest hurdle, is just like not being shy and going out of your way to introduce yourself to somebody, or finding out who do you have to contact to break in. But other than that, it's not so hard, I would say.
Okay, and that's what networking is talking to people and figuring out who they are and letting them know who you are, so you could maybe work together in the future.
Yeah, exactly. Everybody has to start somewhere and get some experience, and to do that, you have to, meet people who are doing that, so that you can start too.
And you're so social, seemingly, too. You always have lots of people surrounding you and friends. I hope it seems like that part would be easier for you. Oh, I have a question from Kevin, Taran, and Josiah asking, how old are you?
I am 27 years old. Turned 20 in a couple months.
Wow. Okay. Just a babe. Okay, and let's see. Oh, let's take a break from asking you questions, and we're going to turn it around. So we're going to ask some questions. These questions are for you, from Shaheen. Let's see if we can ask these for you. Now, we're going to start out with our first poll question here. Let's see if I can get it pulled up. There we go. And remember that you can answer in the box below. What completely unscientific job did Shaheen have in the past? Was he a telemarketer? B, a marketing and sales manager? C, a payroll manager? Or D, all of the above? All right, let's see. See what the pollsters are coming in here. Oh, all these are very different, and some of them sound more boring. Although I'm sure they're not, but just in comparison with what you do now. Let's see. Oh, all right. The polls are coming in. We've got marketing and all of the above. All right. Oh, it looks like we've got all of the above. Which is the right answer?
That is correct. I have done every one of those things at one point prior to this.
Oh wow. Oh my goodness. So many things. I hope they weren't. Are you glad that you're doing what you do now instead?
I am extremely happy that I don't do any of those things anymore.
Okay, good. I'm glad you like your job. All right, so next question up for you. When Shaheen was 15 years old, what did he think he would be when he grew up? A, a scientist, B, a musician, or C, a teacher? Ooh, I don't know this one. Let's see. A scientist, you could already have known. You gave a little hint about that before. Musician, oh, you said you studied music in college. Or a teacher, you're a natural teacher. So let's see. We've got 50% teacher, 50% musician. What's the right answer? Oh, wait, no, we have 20% say scientist. We changed it up. What's the real answer?
I was so dead set on playing guitar for my career. I was going to be a musician. I was going to perform guitar. That was going to be my life.
Do you still play?
I do still play, yeah. I've been playing most of my life, so that's pretty much where that was what I wanted to do. But now it's more of a personal thing and not necessarily how I plan to make money. So.
Okay, well, if you switch over, then we'll have you on again, and you can sing science songs. Here we go. The third one, we have another question. Here's the next one up. What unlikely skill do you need to be a good field scientist? Is it A, dancing, B, woodworking, C, computer programming, or D, acting? Okay, just for me, I bet we'd need all of them. Or it'd be helpful to know all of them. Let's see, we've got, oh, all right, we have it. 50% say computer programming, We've got 25 woodworking, 25 acting. What's the real answer?
Computer programming. Like, most people think that unless you're going to work in computers, you wouldn't really need to know it, but it's a huge help. Especially, like, so you spend all this time collecting all this data. Once you have it, you have to be able to do stuff with it, analyze it, and actually, get results from it. And so that usually involves programming.
And math.
And math.
Yeah, definitely. Well,
although I do have to say, like, that we do spend a fair amount of time actually teaching as well. So acting wouldn't be a terrible skill, because just being able to perform in general does actually help. Because most of when you're presenting your results, it's in the form of a big lecture hall somewhere with an audience, and so it wouldn't be the worst.
When you're communicating something, it helps to have practice at that. That's pretty cool. Well, let's hop right back in to talk about what's ahead for you, Shaheen. What's going on in the future here. So let's see here. Skip past the polls here. So what are your plans for the future?
So immediate plans is to complete my PhD. So I've done all my research, and now I'm, finishing all the analysis, and eventually I'm gonna, publish my little book of results that I have, and hopefully be done. After that, I won't be associated with my current university anymore. So the short-term goal will be to sort of establish myself somewhere new, start applying for permanent positions in other research institutes, and then really once that happens, I'll be able to full blast continue with what I love doing. I want to continue doing science and research, and I want to be able to find sort of my academic home somewhere where I'm going to be able to do that, forever.
Yeah, and we have a question from Ms. Boland's combination class saying, what will you use the data you collected? What will you use that for?
That's a great question. So science, as far as like the science that I do, that data is going to work in my, I'm going to apply that data to future studies always, as long as I'm doing research. But outside of the actual biological research, a lot of what my data goes to is really conservation oriented. And for example, this is actually relates back to the previous question you just asked me as far as plans for the future. So I have other research projects that we're starting already that are going to be sort of long term, and most of what my data goes towards is very conservation-y. It's like how all these places I'm working in, collecting all this interesting academic material, how do we save these places from the problems they're experiencing? So forests are getting torn down. In Indonesia specifically, they're getting burnt down most of the time. Animals are, quickly going extinct and stuff like that. So all the tracking data and things like that I use, and all the forest sampling of the trees and all the inventories I collect are really useful for that. And so, they're going to, every time I publish them, I'm going to work with certain groups to be able to figure out, strategic ways to be able to do conservation that way.
Well, I have, there are, at Mountain View Middle, the research students, they want to know how you try and pass on your research data in order to help those organizations for saving the orangutan. And they also want to know, also from Mountain View Middle, are you working with any organizations in Indonesia to save the orangutans' habitat? So I think they want to know the specific organizations if you know who they are.
Yeah, sure. So a lot of times, so there's two ways they can get my data becomes available to any organization. Really, is one, there's the published form of them, but oftentimes, it'll be just direct communication that people I'm physically working with these people directly in a lot of ways, and so a lot of times it's just direct information sharing. And because of the research that I do, is very specialized, and not many people in the world would be able to do it anyways outside of myself. So I end up becoming directly involved for those reasons as well. Whether it's a type of data that they need to understand or that they need to collect, I might be the only one who can do that. So it's a lot of actual one-on-one when it comes to directly getting involved in conservation. I'll actually contribute data. And as far as in Indonesia, who I work with now, it's a huge international collaborative thing. So where I work now, the Tuanan Orangutan Research Station. So that's, a third of that is my university, Rutgers University. So my PhD advisor, she helped start that. Then there's the University of Zurich from Switzerland that are collaborators and also helped start that. And then there's the National University of Jakarta, which is one of the local Indonesian universities. They're a three-way partnership between those three universities. And then we all work with the Bornean Orangutan Survival Foundation. So they're a big NGO, so a non-government organization that does almost all of the orangutan-related conservation. Even beyond orangutans, they're a conservation organization with a lot of involvement and pull. And I work directly with them constantly. And so, yeah, they're mostly the face and the voice and have the political pull and everything like that to be able to do stuff.
Well, what a unique place to be in with your research, that the people who have the most influence, you can take your data and literally hand it to them. Most scientists are worried about how they're going to get the information out, and you can go, here you go, right here. That's just it must be a cool feeling to be able to be that close. Well, we have another. Oh, sorry. Sorry,
No.
I didn't mean to cut you off. We have more questions. I just want to make sure we get as many as we can. Mount View Middle. How can we inspire kids at our school to protect the planet and animals?
That's a great question. I think half of it is just awareness. So many people don't really understand really what the issues are or the full extent of the problems and what the consequences are, and how it trickles down into every part of life that unexpectedly. So, like, for example, in the case of the orangutans, they're going extinct rapidly due to things like deforestation, habitat loss, climate change, all these things. Palm oil industries are a big part of that, and the trickle-down effect from what they do. Like, if you look at almost anything you buy anywhere, you're going to look at the ingredients that palm oil would be in one of those, right? So, like, that's just one example of how people are sort of unaware of how the trickle-down effect of all these conservation issues. So awareness is the biggest one, and I think kids need to physically see things for it to stick and for them to start to care. Because it's one thing if some stranger is going blah 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 blah, lecturing at them all the time or watching a video or something, versus them getting the opportunity to actually physically go look and see what something is like. It's a different type of understanding, even for adults, I think. And so I think they just need opportunities to get involved, really.
Well, there's a similar question from Sid. Sid says, I'm a 6th grader trying to promote awareness of palm oil deforestation and orangutan habitat loss. Can you give any advice to me on how to promote the topic by raising awareness to kids in middle school?
Great question.
Is the documentary Green? Do you think that would be kind of have you seen that about the orangutan?
I don't know if I've seen that specific one, but yeah, I mean, media is a great way to go. Obviously, especially with the way younger people are nowadays, everything is so media-driven. Everyone's plugged in somehow, and so that's a very quick way and sort of attention-grabbing way to do it. I mean, that might be a way to start if you have a lot of information already pulled together that you can put together something on social media and get it out there. That's one way to start, especially if you're trying to inspire your peers. But also, I feel like a big mistake would be to try to do it all by yourself. For such a big issue and a big message you're trying to push, and if you want to recruit more people, I think you need more people on board in the first place. So I would say maybe start by finding like-minded people who care, or get a few people to care, and create a collaborative project where you can actually do some outreach. That might be the way to go. Otherwise, yeah, it's just a lot to tackle as one person.
That is good advice. It's really good advice. Well, let's go ahead. We have so many questions here, but we need to transition to our last chance questions. So they're going to be firing. Who knows what it's going to be? We've got number one. How many countries have you been to?
18.
How many?
18.
18. Okay, all right. What family do you have? That's from Samantha, Madison, and Rand.
What family do I have?
Mm-hmm.
My immediate family, I have my mother, father, and I have a younger sister. An extended family, I have a very large family.
Awesome. Megan and Tammy want to know, do you have a pet?
I do, actually. I have 2 cats that actually came with me from Indonesia. They lived with me in my little jungle, and I couldn't leave them, so I brought them with me. And I have 2 aquariums where I keep lots of fish.
Wow. You brought cats home from Indonesia? Okay.
I did. I know.
Winnie and Ethan are in 4th grade. They want to know, do you like Star Wars?
I do. I'm a big Star Wars fan.
Yeah, me too. Megan and Tammy, they want to know, what is your most treasured possession?
Wow. I have not thought about it. I guess it would be like non-work related, just personal item. Probably one of my guitars.
Awesome. And what kind of guitar do you play?
Any kind of styles of guitars. I have classical guitars. I have acoustic guitars. I have electric guitars. If you can play it on a guitar, I'll play it. I like all kinds of music.
Okay. I see a collaboration in our future. Science songs. Woohoo! We have another question from Keller Hernandez. Wants to know, what does it feel like to be a scientist?
It feels really cool. Like, on the one hand, you're constantly learning and seeing new things and discovering things, right? And on the other hand, like, you're also being able to communicate all these things that are yours. These are discoveries that you made because of your creativity and your, all the work that you put in, and then you're presenting them to the world in a certain way, and nobody can take that from you either. And so that part of things is really cool. And there's also a level of I don't know, you're sort of the expert in this one subfield that you do, and I don't know how to describe it, but it's a really cool feeling to be the guy that people need to go to for this type of information.
Yeah, so cool. I want to come work with you. Okay, so we have another New Richmond Elementary 6th graders asking, what is an exciting thing that has happened to you while you were doing field research? And we also says, can you share your best moment working in the field? So exciting thing that happened to you in the field, and what was your best moment in the field?
Exciting. I'm not sure what they mean by exciting. I guess well, I've already sort of shared sort of exciting, scary, like being chased by things and stuff like that. But, I'm not sure. That's a tough question. I would say like there's been sort of non-directly data collection things that have been kind of exciting. Like people I've gotten to meet, and people that have been able to come see what we do and to see the site that have been pretty exciting. So like in Borneo, for example, I had a lot of great connections with the people there on different like local levels, government levels, and stuff like that. So we had, a few days where we had, the governor and a couple other big officials come through camp, and that, I had to be their kind of host and meet all of them that way. That's always really exciting to make those connections. There's been like personally exciting things that happen, like sort of goals that I wanted, like getting something published and out there with my name on it and stuff like that. That's been happening. Those types of things are always exciting. What was the other part of the question? Your
best moment working in the field. Did you have like a yes, we did it moment?
Oh.
That's my interpretation of the question.
I'd say that happens to me every time we try to put GPS tags on an animal. I feel like that's such a crazy, stressful experience and tricky experience to do that when you pull it off at the end, it's one of the most rewarding things. Also, getting to the end of a study, I also have that moment like, yes, I survived. I get to go home. Both of those things happen.
Well, this ties in. Gladys, Lisa, and Javier, they're in 4th grade, and they ask, do you have any time to have fun?
You make time. That's the thing. So like, this is my life, right? My life involves doing research and going to these places and being away from people I care about and all these things, and it takes a lot of hours. So, like outside of work, if you want to have a life, you have to take it for yourself. So I definitely make time for myself in the day, one way or the other. There's something I will do for myself, and like, so if it's fitness or if it's socializing with people in some way, yeah, I try to have a good time.
From Queens Creek Elementary, their 5th grade science class wants to know, what's the most interesting discovery in your research?
I've had a few ones recently that I've been really excited about. I haven't published them yet, so I can't go into too much like technical detail about them. But one thing of what I study is whether or not I think the orangutans are actually conscious about their decisions. Like, do they really know everything about their environment, and do they make these certain decisions on purpose? Like, how smart are they really being when they're going for their food? And the data I've gotten so far really shocked me about how good they are in that way. They seem to really be spatially aware of things, which is pretty cool. Another project I'm doing has to do with like how important are the orangutans themselves to the health of the forest, right? So in conservation, we always usually think about the other way around. Oh, we need to block off this forest to save these animals. I was kind of wanting to know, oh, what if the animals are more necessary for the sake of the forest? And so I started looking into how orangutans are they important to the quality of the soil. And I've gotten some really cool results that surprised me that they seem to be very important for that.
That is so neat.
It is really cool. And another random one that's not related to my research, but that I discovered as I was doing my research, I don't study bugs at all. But I was doing experiments with soil nutrients and things like that, and sort of noticed that different treatments I was putting in the soil starts to, like, termites seem to be really attracted to them for some reason. And so just for fun, I kind of started to play with this idea while I was out there, and I discovered that, like, as far as nutrients in the soil, apparently termites are very attracted to phosphorus. And I don't know why yet, but maybe a future branch of research I can run with. But, you know, every now and then you get a little extra treat when you're collecting your data that you can go out there and publish if you're into it.
Wow, that is neat. A total treat.
It was a treat.
No, that's cool. Well, we have time for, let's see, one more here. This is another double doozy from Queens Creek Elementary and from Gladys, Lisa, and Javier. They say, do you have any personal connection to any of the animals? And the second part of it is, do any animals love you?
Yeah. Like, so as a scientist, you're always trained to try to be like as objective and non-personal as possible, so that your data is always top quality. But I mean, we're people, so that's you do get attached to certain animals sometimes. And so when I worked in Panama, I had a favorite spider monkey. Her name was Bree. She was absolutely my favorite spider monkey, and she seemed to react to me as well. Like, she, you know, they don't come down to the ground very often, but she would come down to the ground. Or every now and then I'd find her outside my office or my window somewhere, you know. And so I was very attached to her. In Indonesia, my favorite orangutan right now, his name is Nico. He's a big flanged male. I think actually I may have sent a photo. Oh yeah, there's a picture of Bree, and then that's Nico. Yeah, that big male. He's one of my favorite orangutans. He's just got a lot of character. As far as animals that love me, I don't think. I mean, Bree maybe was curious about me or something, but none of the orangutans seem to either. They're very uninterested, or they're not too enthused. They're just not that excited about me being there. Nico is a special case because he's especially excitable, I guess. And so every time we meet, in the beginning of me knowing Nico, it would be a very sort of him trying to scare me into running away. So yeah, this picture right here actually is a picture of Nico sort of charging me a little bit, and you know, we got face to face a little bit, and it was tense. Now when he sees me, I'll walk up and he'll look at me and he'll go, ah, and then he'll turn away and keep doing what he's doing. So he just kind of makes me laugh that way. He's just very just like, oh, this guy again. And so we have a special relationship, but I'm also one of the only people who can follow him. Everyone else are a little bit nervous to do it. So yeah, you get attached to certain animals.
Oh, wow. That is so neat. And unfortunately, we are all out of time. Shaheen, thank you so much for coming and being with us and sharing your story. And we just loved having you.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for all the questions.
And next time, our next event is on March 17th, and it'll be featuring STEM role model Cass Holman, and she'll talk about her innovations in architecture, art, and toys. Until then, from Jason Learning, I'm Haley Nelson, and we'll see you next time on Jason Live.